This is Pamela Salem, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio.
Podcast? What podcast? You come this way, all this way, just to make a podcast? Stupid. You're a stupid Tassie boy. Your ridiculous childhood obsession for obscure TV is still in your veins. You meet a Sydney boy you've only just crossed paths with, and you end up on YouTube. Like this podcast. What's its name? Its name! Sirens. The Sirens of Audio. The Sirens of Audio. Always the stupid shows. Obsessed with cult TV. Obsessed with audio. Boomers. Never grown up and obsessed. Yes, obsessed. The tripods. Only barely related to your podcast. Boomers. Never grown up and obsessed. I'm not! I started this podcast. Me! Nobody else. Me! And I do it again. And again. And again. And again. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium normally, but today we're doing something quite different. We are going to be talking about the 40th anniversary of the television series, The Tripods, and you'll find out how we're going to tie that into audio as we go. Philip is very busy organising our live events, and as this goes to air, we will be in Sydney with Fraser Hines, and he'll be in full swing with his visits to the east coast of Australia. So we're looking forward to seeing you in Melbourne next week and Brisbane the week after with Katie Manning. So Philip's busy organising that. But to join me today with this episode about the tripods is someone I could not resist having on with me, and that is Mr. Will Hadcroft. Welcome back to the show, mate.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. Lovely to be back.
Yes, I wasn't quite expecting to see you again so soon, but I'm very, very happy that you're back, and it's going to be very exciting to talk about the tripods for a change instead of Doctor Who. We have tried to sneak it in a few times before, but we're going to do it again, aren't we?
Yeah, well, I love the tripods, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
And we've got the 40th anniversary of the television show coming up, as I said, with a special event coming up this month in September. Well, next week, actually, it's happening. So you've been looking forward to that?
Oh, very much so. I've been wanting something like that to happen for such a long time. You know, I was 14 when the tripods first aired on BBC One in Britain. So, and then for years after, always hoping that someone would organise a convention of some kind. The fans themselves have organised meetups. There's a fan group called the League of Free Men, and we've got together at locations where the tripods was filmed, for example, and we've had 2 or 3 actors from the programme come and join us on those meetups. But to have a proper convention in an auditorium, and have the producer there, some of the special effects people there, and behind the scenes people, and all 4 principal actors. That is going to be a real joy. That and the composer Ken Freeman, whom I've admired for 40 years solid, to get to meet him at long last, that would be a bit of a dream come true too. So this is a big deal for fans of the tripods, because it's unlike Doctor Who and Star Trek and the other things. We've not really had anything like this before, to have everybody together, and it'll be quite a smallish gathering compared to the Doctor Who's and the Star Treks, but that sort of intimacy will be lovely, to be able to mingle and talk and exchange stories. Yeah, really, really looking forward to it.
But one of the other features of the get-together is the launch of a new book on the tripods called All for Nothing, question mark, which is the famous final line from the television show. And we've got the author of that book, and I believe the organizer of this event, on the line with us, who's going to join us for the podcast. And that's Chris Jones, coming to us from New Zealand. G'day, Chris.
G'day, Dwight. Hi, Will. Nice to see you again.
Indeed.
So you're coming to us from Wellington, and I guess, and you're organising this event too from New Zealand. Is that right?
Well, I'm part of the team organising it. We put together a group of fans, essentially. How long ago now, Will? A year and a half, probably. We first started talking about this. Yeah,
it's been going a long time, and even before that, the idea had been mooted a long time ago, hadn't it, to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I have to, Dwayne. I know you've confessed, and I'm pretty sure it was you that confessed once upon a time to my good friend Liz Morton, that you have a special place in your heart for Tripods Girls.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and so we can actually blame the other one, Lisa Maxwell, for kicking this off with the suggestion of getting together for a reunion. Which she, when I first interviewed Lisa for the book 7 years ago, she made a stupid throwaway comment that said, "Oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a reunion?"
Yeah,
and then
so it's been 7 years in the making.
The book has, yeah. In fact, the book's been longer than that, but I'll tell you a bit about that history in a while. But yeah, Lisa was the first to say, right, we should get together. Even though her part in it was comparatively small compared to the leads and to a lot of the other crew. But yeah, we can blame Lisa. There you go.
So at the time this podcast hits the feeds, it will be only a week away before this event takes place. And I was very excited, as you said, when I was speaking with Elizabeth, I think it was last year, she did mention this event. And so I started looking into it and seeing whether it was possible for me to get there. Of course, it wasn't possible for me to get there, but the lineup was incredible. So I've got here a list of some of the first guest announcements that you had. So you got Robin Hayter, Richard Bates, Elizabeth Morton, Bob Blagden, Lisa Maxwell, Christopher Penfold. Those were your first announcements. So tell us a bit more about the process behind getting this event together.
It really, Dwayne, it really has stemmed from the work done during those 7 years of the book and beyond. It's, of course, all of these people have been interviewed and been, I've been keeping them in the loop about various things, and we've all, pretty much got to know each other pretty well. I caught up with a lot of them when I was over for my final research trip to the UK last year. And I mean, sadly, we've had a couple of, Lisa in the end isn't going to be there because she's got a memorial service for a friend that's been put on the same day. And next to her there, Christopher Penfold sadly passed away a few weeks ago. So those two will be absent. But yeah, it would be, I mean, it would not be a lie to say that the turnout of cast and crew is just simply because I hope they've all enjoyed the process of getting becoming aware of the tripods again and being part of the book interview process. And so I've tried to sort of plant the seed as often as I can and as positively as I can with them about attending the event. And yeah, hopefully it's paying off. I always thought during that process of writing the book and doing all that research and doing so many interviews, I thought it's actually not fair that I'm the only one who gets to enjoy this. The number of times I thought, wow, I'm so lucky, and I know so many people who would like to experience a part of this. And so, yeah, so it didn't really take long to sort of take Lisa's suggestion seriously and say, oh, actually, maybe we could tie something in here.
Yeah. And I guess the most exciting thing of all the guests was to get the original three casts back together, particularly John Shackley, because John lives overseas, doesn't he? So does Kerry live overseas as well, or is he
No,
is he in the UK?
Kerry's in the UK, yeah, as is
Okay.
Jim, of course. But yeah, John. Look, I mean, yeah, I first mentioned it to John a couple of years ago, sort of thinking if there's any chance that of getting John there, then should really give him plenty of notice and start
Yeah.
dropping the odd hint. But to his credit, I mean, John's coming all the way from Chile. He's going to catch up with family and so on as well in the UK at the time. But he's been so good. He's flown over of his own accord. It's just quite mind blowing, really. And him and Kerry and Jim and Robin Hayter, our fourth main cast member, have just all their commitment to making the book good, and now to getting together for the celebration is out of this world. Really, I'm not sure if that's common in fandom, but I certainly feel pretty blessed that they've given this the time of day that they have.
Yeah, and speaking of the book, and sadly for those who are just finding out a bit about this now, the event on the 14th is sold out, isn't it? So
yeah, that I mean, it sold out extremely quickly because there were only a very limited number of public tickets because it is a very intimate, small event. It's effectively in a village hall, to give it that nice sort of almost tripodsy kind of feel that's been developed through smaller tripods fan events over the years that Will has been a part of, and that date right back to the fan club in the 1980s. They had that lovely flavour of actually just no barriers that that a wonderful guy by the name of Adrian Andrews, who started the fan club back in 1985. He kicked it off with this flavour and this feeling that to get people really personally involved in the show, and so that's why we kept the initial event quite small, because it was largely a reunion for the cast and crew off the back of the book, but they were all up for including some fan involvement in it. But still, it's a small event. But I mean, luckily, we're going to be doing a book signing as well the following day, which is open to the public on the 15th, and so several of the cast and crew who are up on screen there on the right hand side are attending that, which is very good of them to fit two things into the same weekend.
Fantastic. So what do people have to do? Do you need to get tickets for the book signing, or just turn up and get a book, or how does that work?
Turn up, and as long as you can still pre-order the book at that address there. You can. It's best to pre-order it for pickup at the signing because there won't be an infinite number of books there, so you want to make sure that you actually do walk away with one. There's no signing fee. The guys aren't charging for autographs, but we are aligned to the charity Centrepoint, for whose mission is to work away at the youth homelessness sort of crises in the UK. So Centrepoint are the beneficiary. So it's basically cash donation on the day to Centrepoint to get your autographs. Just a one drop in the bucket, and there you go.
Don't get that too often these days anymore, do you, Will? When it comes to autographs.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Now, I want to ask you about the book, but first of all, Chris, tell us about your obsession with the tripods. How did it start? What grabbed you into it? Are you a fan of any other sci-fi IPs like Doctor Who, like Will and myself, or what is it about the tripods that's so special for you?
Yeah, I do love that word obsession. And as much as many people sort of think it's a negative thing, it's actually not far from the truth. Let's be honest. I mean, we're all middle-aged guys now, and we've been obsessed with these things for a long time. And I mean, look, I got obsessed in exactly the same way Will did, and you too, probably, Dwayne. I mean, I just thought it was the coolest thing on telly when I was 14. That's exactly the age. Will, you were saying that you came across it, and over here in New Zealand, it was on at 7 p.m. straight after the evening news on a Saturday night. And for a kid who'd grown up with Star Wars and Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, and Land of the Giants and all that kind of stuff, it was Christmas. It was just so much cooler than anything else that we'd seen, and especially so much more advanced than we were expecting to see things from the BBC, of all places.
Yeah.
As soon as it kicked off and that first scene happened, and then the intro titles roll, which were pretty out there for the time. I just remember our whole family, we were watching it from the dinner table at the time, just going, "Wow, this is not the BBC. Come on."
So you were getting it one episode a week, were you?
We didn't realise we were getting two. We were getting it on for an hour each night, which is a really good way of watching it. That is the way to watch it.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I did a rewatch not that many months ago and watched two at a time. And the pace of it, because the series one especially has been criticised over the years for being very slow, tortuously slow at times. But I found that if you watch two episodes in one sitting, which is an hour, like you say, it doesn't feel tortuously slow at all. You get absorbed by it. And in Britain, it was billed as this big new sci-fi thing. I can remember the trailer, the tripods coming to BBC One, and then a shot of the foot gliding across the lake and plunging in, and the capping of Jack, and the basic concept of it. So in Britain, the youngsters of our generation were expecting this big science fiction blockbuster thing, because that's what the clips implied. So then when it slowed down and became a little bit more like a period drama, and that it was called The Tripods, but there weren't that many tripods in it. I can remember a lot of my peers and classmates dropping away by about episode 3 or something. But I stayed with it because I was fascinated by the idea that it looked like the past. It looked like 17th century or something. But it was 100 years or so in the future. And the idea of people being conditioned by the cap are very caught up in that. The fact that the bad guys were actually everybody around you. Everyone who's capped is potentially an enemy. And I found that, the subtlety of that, very appealing indeed. So although I too was disappointed that there weren't that many tripods in it across the 13 episodes of Series 1, I was held by the idea of people being capped, and those who had avoided the process were trying to get to a place of safety, but having to deal with capped people all the time. The threat's always there, isn't it? That they would have to be put through the process themselves, those boys. So I got sort of an intellectual excitement from it, really, thinking about conditioning and brainwashing and so on. So I was in for the long haul, even though once we got to the Chateau episodes, thinking that this isn't what I thought it was going to be, but I still like it.
I don't ever remember being bored of it during that first run, but on rewatches, it was always that, as you said, Will, that sense of danger was everywhere. Wasn't necessarily from the tripods because they weren't always present, but you never felt safe. I certainly bought into the mission of the main characters. I found them really believable, and I was on their side right from the get go. And it's, I think considering the supposed lack of tripods in that first season, I think it still does manage to retain its threat pretty well. Even during an episode of Treading Grapes and so on.
Yeah.
It's sort of the threat is still there because one of the girls is engaged to a blackguard kind of thing, and it never really goes away. Even at the chateau, you've got the bad, horrible Duke de Sala who's gonna basically bring in the blackguards and figure out a way of making them pay for their wayward ways.
And all the girls were cute. I enjoyed all the girls. You had it on weekly. I had, in Australia, we had it on at 4:30 in the afternoon every day. So it was like almost a flash in the pan. It would be over within a couple of weeks. It was, I can't remember if it was every day of the week, but it was certainly I would come home from school and it would be on at 4:30. So fortunately at that time, we had a video recorder. So I was able to, somehow I recorded from episode 1 off the TV and just kept them and watched them over and over again. Was really looking forward to the second season. I was so looking forward to the third season too. You've got no idea. But yeah, it was interesting the way you guys had it stretched out a little bit more than particularly with Channel 7 being one of the financiers. I would have thought they might have wanted to spread it out a bit too.
Make as big a deal of it as possible for their investment. Exactly. I've come across so many people on social media from Australia who actually just didn't catch it at the time, and they're only just finding out now that there was a TV series made from John Christopher's books. Wow, it's an epiphany. But the other interesting thing, and I don't know if this happened for you in Australia, Dwayne, they actually ran both seasons back to back for us. We got it all in one go.
Gotcha.
So it was all over in 3 months, even though it was 2 episodes a night. 13 weeks of fun, and then it was all gone. So a lot of people over here missed it as well, or don't recall it because it was over pretty quickly. There wasn't a 2-year period, for example, where we had tripods. Just 3 months.
Now, you didn't mention if there were any other TV shows that you liked. Like Will and I are quite obsessed with Doctor Who. Will's even written 1 or 2 for audio. What about yourself? I can see some Star Wars figures behind you, but I don't see any Cybermen or Daleks. I don't see anything there like that.
You don't. There's something that Doctor Who never quite got me. I'm tempted to say I never quite got Doctor Who, but the fact is, and I've thought about this a lot in relation to the other BBC sci-fis that I really do like, or that clicked with me. And I think it was simply a timing thing with Doctor Who. I had a big brother who had a Doctor Who annual from 1978 or something with Tom Baker on the cover, and that is my biggest memory of Doctor Who as a kid, is the annual that my brother had. But I think I was 4 years younger, and I was probably too scared to watch it in that period, or at least to enjoy it. And by the time I really tried, I tried to get into Doctor Who, it was the Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy years. And as of course, as it's been told to me many times since, perhaps that wasn't the right time to actually really try and become a Who fan. So, I did try. I bought the soundtrack CD with Keith McCulloch's music on it and so on to try and get myself in the mood. That was out at the time. It was the 25th anniversary CD that was released at the time. Yeah. I bought that, and I so wanted to be a fan, but I can only say that I had really high standards because I'd already become a Tripods fan, and I just thought that all BBC sci-fi was going to be as great for a teenager as the Tripods was. But I didn't feel that way about Who, strangely enough.
Even the Kev McCulloch album I mean, Kev does his own thing, his own way, but and I'm not going to knock that, but it ain't Ken Freeman. You know,
No,
it's
that's
not
true.
that style at all. I can imagine you listening to the Kev McCulloch album, thinking, "Oh, this is going to be like Ken Freeman," you know, and it's not. It's nothing. It's not even like the style of incidental music that precedes Kev McCulloch in Doctor Who. It's a very unique take on the incidental music for the Sylvester McCoy era that Kev
Yeah.
did. So you're not even getting a sort of standard Doctor Who soundtrack album there with that record.
No, but fortunately for
Absolutely.
me, though, it did have various cuts of the main theme. You know, it had Peter
Yeah,
Howell's
yeah,
reimagining. It didn't quite have the original Delia Derbyshire, but um, there were a few. You know, and I just loved that theme. I mean, the Doctor Who
yeah.
theme is just, you know, I play in bands and I always try and put the Doctor Who theme in there somewhere in the evening, whether it be the band playing it or during the breaks or something, to make sure that
Yeah.
people get to hear it, because I just love the feel of just the thrill of that theme. I think it's still just one. I mean, as much as I love the Tripods, the Doctor Who theme is also something else.
A
Sure
unique
is.
piece.
Okay, so Chris, tell me about how the book came about. You've written this book. You've already said that it's taken more than 7 years to get together. It's about to be launched. It's got to feel good to get to this stage. But how did it all start?
It started 20 years ago. Dwayne. So 20 years ago, I'm a graphic designer by trade, and obviously a fan of the Tripods, same as you guys. So 20 years ago, when people who'd been involved in the show started coming out of the woodwork again, as I mentioned earlier, Adrian Andrews, who'd run the fan club, Jim Baker had come out of the woodwork by then, and I think Robin Hayter, who plays Fritz, was also just about to start bubbling away. I'm a graphic designer. I love beautiful books, and I buy books about the making of films, and books about industrial light and magic, and that's what I've been spending my time reading since I was 13, kind of thing, even before the Tripods were on TV. So I knew that there hadn't been a book about the Tripods done, and I thought, well, okay, this is starting to feel perhaps possible if these people are coming out of the woodwork. And by that stage, we'd had there was one website in particular that was very good, a UK website, which you probably both know, which was Graham Nelson, wasn't it, Will? Who did that?
Yeah. I remember discovering that and loving it, that website.
Yeah, and that was the best thing we had at that point, and it was very good. It had some behind the scenes production information, and Graham had pulled together a really good website for the time, which would have been, I guess, late 90s. I suppose he was doing that. But look, I mean, I reached out 2004, reached out to Jim Baker initially and said, "Hey, Jim, my background is I'm a graphic designer, print manager, been working with publications my professional career. What do you think about a book based on the experiences that you all had making the series?" And Jim said, "Yeah, I would love that. We should get Adrian Andrews involved." So at that point, it was the brotherhood of three of us, which is somewhat appropriate for a Tripods themed piece. And we threw around various ideas, and Adrian started mentioning it in various posts out to the fan group and so on. But that's about as far as it ever really went. We all just got busy doing other stuff, and it wasn't really a priority. And there was other great stuff happening in the world of Tripods at the time. There were fan meetups over in the UK and in Germany. Some great ones, and of course, Jim was campaigning to get the double box, double disc, 4-disc set of the 2 series of the tripods released, and which he succeeded in, along with everybody else who put some pressure on the Beeb at the time. So there was good stuff happening. So for quite a while, it didn't really seem like a priority. Everybody was pretty happy. But in the long history of this long and winding road of this book, without me realizing, and without I think Adrian or Jim realizing, another of our good friends, Graham Richards, from the League of Free Men group, around 2010, 2011, started doing some really good work in terms of prepping for a book. Graham had an idea too, and so he was conducting some interviews with some key people, which in benefit of hindsight, that was actually extremely valuable, the work that he did, because some of those people have passed away now, like, of course, Doctor Who legend Christopher Barry, being one of those key interviews.
Yep.
Our other first series director, Graham Theakston, passed away the same year as Christopher. So yeah, I have to take my hat off to Graham, because when I got back in touch in 2017 and was ready to pick the project up again, he'd kind of, like, due to personal reasons, it had sort of wound down for him, and he didn't quite have the energy to see it through. And he said, we met up in the UK, and he had a chat, and he said, yeah, look, you're welcome to all the interviews that I did, and you can use that as a basis for kicking off the new, the latest effort with the book. And so since then, 7 years ago, it's been a massive focus for me, and it's been an absolute joy. I just felt so privileged to be doing it, really. Yeah.
Excellent. So it's all culminating this week when it's being finally released, and so just in hardback at the moment.
Yeah, just in hardback. I don't think it will ever exist as an ebook. It's just not the same experience. It's a beautiful book. I mean, there are over 600 images in it. It's not something you can read on your Kindle. It's full color throughout, hardback, over 300 pages. So many, lots of photos from behind the scenes, lots of concept drawings, storyboards, scriptings. I'd probably never put it out in an ebook format. There's been a PDF that's gone out to a few reviewers and so on, which has been handy. But that's not really ever meant for public consumption, admittedly. And as the graphic designer, I'm probably, like, massively, I've written it and designed it, so I've kept a really tight rein on the creative side of it to make sure that it actually that it doesn't get watered down by an uncaring publisher, effectively. Tried to make sure it stays in, passionate hands. And Will's had a little hand in it as well. So those who I've reached out to have generally been extremely invested in the tripods.
One of the characters involved in the book that you would have no doubt interviewed, that I want to talk about to tie into the audio side, because this is an audio-based podcast where we deal with mainly audio drama, but music as well, and that's Ken Freeman. Now, I want to read something that I just discovered before we came on Discogs, something that Richard Bates said. He said, in the late 1970s, I was getting close to achieving my ambition to produce a television series based on John Christopher's award-winning trilogy, The Tripods. Whilst I certainly had made no plans about who might adapt or direct the series, I'd made up my mind about the composer. Not that I yet knew his identity. I'd recently become intrigued by a television commercial for BMW. The visuals showed a sleek car moving through a graveyard of earlier models which were buried nose down in the ground. It was an eerie image, but the music had an extraordinary quality, a mix of sounds, some cacophonous, some musical, some unworldly. I knew that this would be the sort of music track I wanted for the tripods.
The luxury car that does not evolve is the luxury car that will not survive. The future demands a more intelligent, a more efficient, a more responsive breed of car. The new generation BMW 7 Series. The luxury car is dead. Long live the luxury car.
But who was this composer? Where did he live? Was he perhaps German or American? An international figure who otherwise wrote lavish scores for expensive movies? I set out to track him down from my newly established office at BBC Television in London. Much to my surprise, he didn't work beside a sunny pool in California, but from a house in Greenford, a short distance away. He wasn't yet an international figure, but a modest, committed composer with an exceptional ear for combining electronic wizardry with the practiced talent of creative musicianship. His name was Ken Freeman. The television series went on to win its plaudits and criticisms around the world, but whatever its shortcomings, nobody has ever questioned the quality, originality, and appropriateness of Ken Freeman's exceptional music track, and that's Richard Bates. Will, you're a bit of a muso yourself. What about the music grabs you?
Oh, well, there's so much about it. I thought back in the day that it was a little bit the way Murray Gold does it now for Doctor Who, and Christopher Franke on Babylon 5. I thought the Tripod's music was a fusion of synthesizers and a string orchestra, because the electronics were, I mean, I suppose by today's standards you can tell it is all electronic, but back in 1984 I thought the strings on it were real strings. Because I didn't realize that Ken Freeman isn't just a musician and composer, is a bit of an inventor as well, and built his own synthesizers. So they are way ahead of the commercial equivalent. You know, he contributed to Jeff Wayne's musical version of the War of the Worlds. The synthesizers on there. I remember after Tripods had been on, I would look at my copy of the War of the Worlds album and look at the credits. And I used to look at the credits and wonder why no orchestra was credited on War of the Worlds. But it said that keyboards were played by Ken Prof Freeman. That's how he's credited on there. So I now realize that the that string sound that's on War of the Worlds is Ken's synthesizers, which were, you know, ahead of the commercial equivalent. They were more advanced than sort of the Minimoog sound that you got from people like Gary Newman in 1979. So you've got, in 1984, you've got the Tripod soundtrack. It doesn't sound like the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, as much as a fan of those guys that I am.
Yep.
It sounds more advanced, more textures to it. And as Richard Bates wrote in that review there, you can hear all these different levels of science fiction type sounds, but the sort of it's like a classic composer, like someone who would compose for an orchestra. All the sweeping sounds, you know, you've got when they get to the mountains, for example, you've got these wonderfully grand pieces of music that go along with those mountain scenes. When they're training for the games contest, you've got this wonderful suite of music that goes over the top of that. Dan, da, 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 dan, dan, ba, ba, bum, da, da, ding, da, da, ding, all this stuff going on. And you've got like the love theme for Eloise at the chateau.
I always
Then
like
you
the
got
chase scenes too, because you've got all
yeah,
that beautiful synthesis of orchestral and electronic, with
yeah,
beats going through, which are
and
really cool.
the theme tune as well. You've got a more electronic sounding opening theme with that synthesizer-y bass line to it, which sounds sci-fi. But then you get to the slower, more triumphant sounding melody of the closing theme, and you've got that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, which Ken has said since he stole from Holst's Mars, the classical piece, to have that warlike ba-ba-bam, bam, ba-da-bam, bam. But then you've got that that really sweet melody over the top of it on the strings and the horns. I absolutely, when it was announced on the end credits, you may like to know that this theme music is now available on a BBC single. I thought, yes, I do want to know that, thank you. And I can remember going to W.H. Smith, the newsagents chain in Britain and in my local town in Bolton, and ordering it. We had a records and tapes floor upstairs, and I went in and ordered it. And I can remember waiting week after week for them to tell me it's come in. And I have vivid memories of going up there, phoning them up, has it come in? Yes, it has, and being so excited to go on the bus up to Bolton and pick up the theme music. I can remember holding the single in my hand on the bus back, and looking at the image of the tripod from the chateau sequence, the tournament, that picture, and on the back it was I now realise a reverse photo from the first episode of the tripod standing in the pond, and I hadn't, unlike you, Dwayne, I hadn't got Series 1 recorded on video, so I just had these two pictures, front and back of this record, to represent Series 1 for a good while, and reading the credits on it and reading the little blurb. And then when I got home and played it, I can remember my mother standing over my shoulder, frowning at it. And she said, this is that record you've been waiting weeks and weeks for. And I said, yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? He's even enhanced it so there's more to it than how it sounds on television. And she just stood there frowning, thinking, oh, well, if you think it's exciting. It didn't do anything for her at all. But then she didn't appreciate the way it was done. She didn't appreciate that it was all electronic. She didn't appreciate the comparison with the Radiophonic Workshop. She wasn't thinking in those terms. It's just a nice piece of music to her, and that's all it was. But to me, it was a big deal, and I really wanted an album of incidental music to come later. And when I realised that it wasn't coming, we got a video recorder. We'd just acquired one, my family, on the penultimate episode of Series 1, where they blow the tripod up with the grenade. So when it came to Series 2, I did what you did, Dwayne, tape the whole lot of Series 2. But then I went through all the episodes months and months later with a cassette recorder and captured all the bits of music that had no dialogue on. And there's quite a bit where you might have sound effects and things in the background, but no speech. So you've got all these little sequences of musical suites that you can capture on cassette. And that was my incidental music album for about 10 years. And then a gentleman called Jerry Forrester had got together with Ken Freeman, and they produced a CD of incidental music. And when that came out, I think it came out in 1994. Yeah, 10 years. And I was so excited by that. I wrote to a magazine called TV Zone, which was a big deal back in the 1990s. And I wrote to them how excited I was that I'd waited so long for this music score, and now it was on CD. And they printed the letter, and along with a photograph of the three leads from Series 1 standing over a model tripod. It's a famous image. And underneath it, the legend was "Tripods, music worth waiting for." And I thought, you too right. Yeah, too right. It certainly, I played the CD to death, and my mother, by the time I was done with the single record, hated theme music. I played it a lot. And then I was married by the time the CD came out. So my wife and stepson then had to endure the CD on constant repeat. Yeah. It's remarkable television music. I can't think of many TV scores that are, even now, that are match it, really.
No. Chris, was the music something that attracted you as well?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, I grew up in a musical household, and I think, I don't know what year it was that I first composed or recomposed Ken's theme as a MIDI track on our old Macintosh computer, probably about 1988, the year after it had been on TV in New Zealand. I'm intimately familiar with every note of Ken's soundtrack, and it would be the people have asked, conversation comes up, what's your favorite album in your collection, or the album that's the most important to you, and they're expecting something from the Who or Led Zeppelin, or that's really credible for a musician, and what's the one CD you would take with you if your house was burning down? And I think you know what it is. It's it ain't Led Zeppelin. Yeah, it's unlike anything else. I loved the music, and I think in talking with both Ken and with Jerry Forrester, who did the soundtrack, I think a lot of the magic is the fact that this was Ken's first opportunity to write incidental music. He hadn't done that before, and he was for him it felt like his big break. The first opportunity to really get into this meaty project. He'd done a couple of years with Jeff Wayne on War of the Worlds, and that had been for him a project that he might be a bit too negative to say sick of by the end of it, but it had gone on a bit too long. I think, which is understandable. It was a massive undertaking and an amazing result. But so for me, Dwayne, music is massive, and I still, what do I do when I want to unwind? I'll go up to the piano and I'll actually play some random piece of Ken's incidental music that probably no one else in the world is playing. But there are a lot of great cues that didn't make it onto the soundtrack CD. So I think I firmly believe there's room for an extended soundtrack release, ideally, and that is something they thought about at the time, but opted not to do.
I remember I dropped. Sorry, Dwayne. I dropped him a line about having more, and he said that the tapes, the original tapes, are so old now. He said that they would have to be put through a baking process. That's how he described it, to make them fluid again, so that they would play, and that would cost a lot of money. So he said, if you have the money, I will gladly bake them, and then we'll get another album out of it. It's such a shame. It fascinates me as well, Chris, because you'll know about this. What you were just saying there about you playing it yourself. fans on League of Freemen, one or two, have recreated the theme, haven't they? As one gentleman did it on an acoustic guitar, I remember, where he played the the rhythm, and then played the on a separate track, and then mixed them and uploaded it to the website, the old Yahoo website that we used to have. So it does move people to want to have a go themselves. It's inspiring.
It does move
And of
people.
course, we know, of course, the fateful Series 3 didn't occur, but there is some music that was inspired by Series 3 that's out there too. So Ken Freeman did release an album, The Pool of Fire. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, Ken hasn't spoken specifically too much about that, but there was information that came out at the time. I mean, effectively, he was commissioned by the group that was releasing the box set of the first and second series in 2009, and they wanted to have something additional to excite people. So he was commissioned to write that, which in hindsight I find quite surprising that they were able to do that, given Disney's hold over the over new tripods content that they've had for the last 27 or so years, 26 years. So, but it's great, isn't it, that it got out there, and that we have six or seven tracks there that tell, well, that would accompany roughly some of the core or the key moments in that third part of the trilogy, because it's sort of the closest imagining we have so far, or the biggest hint we have so far of what we might have been in store for, should that series have not been lasered by those dark lords of sci-fi. You know the ones I'm talking about.
Oh, don't get me started, Chris.
Yes, Lord Grader.
So you've spoken, you've spoken with Ken, obviously, about this. How does he feel about his contribution to the tripods?
He's extremely proud. I mean, Ken's spoken to me, and before me, he spoke to Graham back in 2010, 2011 as well, and provided some great information then. But look, I mean, for him, the biggest disappointment was not being able to go on and do the third series at the time. That was a real
everyone's disappointment.
Yeah, he was lined up to do that. That's the thing about the project that he said was the worst thing, even worse than the unreliable technology of the time, where his synclavier kept on crashing and losing data, and he had to reprogram all the sounds in between the first and second series, kind of thing. There were plenty of things that didn't go right for him during the project, because of course all that technology was so new, and it was there was plenty that went wrong. But look, he's obviously proud enough of it to come and celebrate with us. Next week, in September, he's going to be there with us for the first time, and he's not coming from a short distance. He's coming from Spain, so this means something to him, I'm sure.
Excellent. All right. Well, I've got something to contribute to Tripod's history, and that's an interview I did with Jim Baker for the Nerdology podcast about 4 years ago, I believe it was, just over 4 years ago. And now I finally have an excuse to play that on my own podcast here. So I'm going to share that with you now. It's audio only, but it's my little chat that I was very proud to have with Jim Baker. All right, we're talking with Jim Baker from the Tripods way back in the day. Hello, Jim, and thanks for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Hello to you, and hello to everyone that's listening. Nice to have you with us.
So tell us about what you were doing before the Tripods. How old were you when the Tripods, and what were you doing before that? How did you get into acting in the first place?
Well, I was very young when I started working on the tripods. I was 16. It was exam year at school, at my secondary school. I had joined a sort of amateur drama club, which I went to every Saturday afternoon. And that also then turned into a professional agency where children were put forward for adverts and stage work, all kinds of professional work. And I went for some auditions for adverts and one thing and another. And then one day I was told to go along to this audition for the tripods, which I thought was perhaps camera tripods. I didn't know anything about it. And so I went along and read the script along with a few other people. And I was lucky enough to look and sound like Henry, how they envisioned Henry should look and sound. So I think that was my lucky break. I just happened to be able to read the script in the way that they wanted it read, you know. So I was at school doing a drama club weekly. Yeah, that was basically how it started.
Okay, so once you got the role, did you kind of do your research? Did you go back and read the books? And what was your opinion of them if you did?
Well, I really liked the books. They were the sort of the old style classic boys' own adventure books, which I enjoyed reading. Once I knew I had the part, I was actually given book one, which I read. When the scripts came along, however, I realized there were some differences. And I stopped reading the books at that point because it was important for me to sort of focus on the way that the scripts were taking the story and the differences. I didn't want there to be any confusion. But certainly once filming had ended, I carried on reading and certainly read through to the end of book 3. But I have only, you know, to be honest, I've only read them once. And that was way back then.
Tell us about your fellow cast members. What was the chemistry like between you?
It was very good. I think John Shackley and I remember being sent off to lunch down in London during the audition process. I think the producers and the directors knew at that stage that we were likely to be offered the parts. When we were sent off to get some lunch together to see how we bonded together, even though we were from very different backgrounds and different parts of the country, we did get on quite well. And Kerry was the last to be cast, if I remember correctly. And there was a bond between the three of us, but we each had our own relationship with each other. I think Kerry had a unique relationship with John, which was developed certainly during season 2, because obviously I was no longer there at that point. But there was a chemistry which I think worked well, and that's a testament to the people that auditioned us. I think they looked for that special bond between us because we were going to spend a lot of time together. You know, it was a boy's own journey about these 3 guys traveling across Europe. And so it had to work and it had to be natural. So, yeah, we got on well and still do now, although we don't talk anywhere near as frequently as we once did. But we do, when we do talk, we get on really well.
You mentioned that the books were quite different to the scripts, and there were quite a few extras that were added for the TV series, like particularly your romances. And yours in particular, there was a bunch of girls who were added too that didn't appear in the books. How was that for you as a young actor to kind of portray that young romance? Was that challenging for you?
Well, certainly being 16 years old, there are some fairly obvious, I guess, anxieties around being thrown into a situation where your character falls in love, etc. So I remember there were some mild anxieties, but they quickly went. I think the young actress Cecilia, who played my love interest at the Vineyard, she was, although young herself, she was very mature. I think we were all approaching it in a very professional manner. And so there were some young anxieties, but I think once we'd rehearsed it a few times, we sort of got over that and we were able to feel comfortable in the way it was running. And I certainly have very fond memories of those times. Those girls, and certainly the mother, the V show's mother, just made it very easy. They were all really great people, and it was easy to relax in that environment. So I don't remember the anxiety being a real problem.
One thing I did notice was the amount of location filming that was done on the series, and you travelled all over the place, lots of places, lots of different places in Wales, and even Port Merion, where well, obviously, I don't know if you know of The Prisoner, which was set there, and there was Doctor Who's been there as well. It's a very, very well used location. Do you have any memories of those different locations that you had at the time?
I have lots of memories of all of those locations, but they were so. We did about 6 months going from location to location, and a lot of them were in Wales. So I have been back actually to the locations to try and find specific places, but it's quite difficult because there are so many, and they're sort of dotted around in places that are quite remote, you know. But the locations were great, and it was, I mean, Port Merion sticks out, as does a lot of the stuff in Wales, where many series like Doctor Who, as you say, were filmed. They stick out as well. The old slate mines and the disused slate railways, the mining railways, were very interesting. But the whole process was really quite exciting to me. I mean, I went on location as I say, a 16, 17-year-old lad. We were away for 6 months at a time. We had a coach that was literally dedicated to moving us around. And sometimes it was just myself, John and Kerry, and maybe one or two other people that were going from location to location on this coach. And the coach was used as a place for people to sit and relax and eat food and stuff like that once we arrived at the location. But it was our personal transport, which was quite fun, having this enormous coach all to ourselves. So we went around in style and we were treated very well, but it was so busy. A lot of the locations do sort of blend into each other now, many, many years on. It's hard to separate some of the memories out, but really fun times, really great and exciting times for a 16, 17-year-old, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever get up to any antics, misbehave, or get into trouble?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But I couldn't possibly tell you about that. No, I think it was just average stuff for people of that age. We were so busy. I mean, honestly, most days on location were 14 or 15 hours at least. Some were even longer. We would be back in the hotel for 9 o'clock. We would have a bite to eat and relax for a little while. But we'd be up at 6 and back on location. You know, most of the food we ate was actually on location. Breakfast and lunch was on location. And it was very busy, quite hectic. So the antics were really quite limited because of how busy we were, you know.
Getting to the end of Series 1, I guess you were probably only contracted for Series 1, but having read the books, you probably would have anticipated Series 3. Was there any scripts for Series 3? Or was that cancelled before you even got there? And how did you feel about that, knowing that Henry was pretty much the hero of the third season?
I was, of course, looking forward to that very much, having read the books and knowing where the story was going, and having discussed it with people at the BBC. But there were no scripts issued to us. I believe they did treatments for the episodes, so that the writers had something to go at, something to, you know, form their scripts around. But it was to be reasonably true to the third book. So Henry was going to end it in the way that he did in the third book. No spoilers. How that made me feel? Well, I finished my filming quite early on in Series 2, when Series 2 filming began. Robin Hayter had arrived on set to do a few scenes, just as I was just finishing off my last few scenes. And I then went off to normal life, if you can call it that, and fully anticipated getting the nod and the wink as to when I would start filming once again for Series 3. But that never came. And unfortunately, one day I got a letter and a phone call from Richard Bates saying that it was cancelled and how sorry he was. And it was really very upsetting because we'd put a lot of work in. You know, a lot of the production team had stayed with it, the designers and the directors, and certainly the producers, Richard Bates. It wasn't just another job to these people. It was a project that they had given a lot of time and effort to, as we all did. And so it was very disappointing to have it cancelled in that way, especially when the story wasn't ended. You know, there's been many BBC shows since then that have just gone on endlessly, but this was a finished, rounded product. You know, it was a trilogy, a story in 3 parts, and to not finish it, I think, was, in artistic terms, it was criminal not to finish it. And from a personal point of view, of course, it was quite upsetting because, as I say, we spent a lot of time and effort, and we were really hoping to get it done, but it wasn't to be. The accountants and those above us decided it wasn't to be. So what can you do?
So my research tells me that Michael Grade is the one responsible for cancelling the tripods, and you probably wouldn't have even known him. But was there any other detail about why it was cancelled that you heard of, or was that way above your pay grade?
Way above my pay grade, but I initially blamed Michael Grade for that, but I have been told subsequently that it was actually accountants within the BBC didn't like the way the budget was. It wasn't going overspend, but what the producers had done had moved some money from Series 2 to Series 1, and subsequently they'd taken a little bit earmarked for Series 3 and put that into Series 2. And they then presumed that there was going to be quite a massive overspend on Series 3. But of course, everything spent in Series 2, for example, tripods model, tripod cities and things like that, costumes, one thing or another, would all be reused for Series 3. So it was projected to all fall level at the end of Series 3. So those who knew were saying, well, this is a bit premature. Why cancel it? We expect to come in on budget and on time, etc. But they just said, no, we don't like that. So we're cancelling it, and the viewing figures don't warrant it. But if you look back at the viewing figures at the time, there are a lot of BBC shows now that would be really quite honoured to get the viewing figures that we were getting. I realise TV is very different now. We have many, many more channels. BBC back in the 80s, mid-80s, had a sort of captive audience almost. So that's probably why audiences always show as being higher. But we certainly weren't lagging in the audience department. And I think there are a few red faces in the BBC wishing that they had completed it, because now, looking back at it now, they would have at least had a completed, a rounded product. You know, they would have had a story that was told in full and something that would work now. I think they can't show it now because it does end so abruptly, and it's maybe a bit of an embarrassment for them.
Yeah, you're right. Now that you mention it, I've never noticed it on any streaming channels or cable TV when it was going. Never noticed it being replayed there. It's only ever been released as a DVD package. So in that sense, it's a bit of a shame that it was never finished. But I believe Disney's had the rights ever since then. Have you heard anything about on the grapevine? I know it's a work in progress, but can you give any more detail about what you may have heard Disney's doing with the project?
Well, I'm afraid to say I don't. I know as much as you do that Disney have bought up the rights to it. And one thing I do know is that Disney often buy rights to things just merely to stop other people from having them and from being able to make them. It's kind of like the way that big supermarkets work. They buy up land under the pretense of building a supermarket, but in fact, all they want to do is stop their competitors from having that land to build a supermarket. You know, Disney are a law unto themselves. Within Disney's copyright laws, for example, I understand that you cannot copy anything Disney produce, obviously, but they also include a clause that says you can't use any media to copy Disney that is brought in from another planet by aliens. just to cover their asses, because they're so fearful that somebody will copy their stuff or infringe their copyright, that they even copy stuff that hasn't been invented yet, or indeed brought to the planet by aliens. So there's a little bit of debate around whether Disney will make it. I personally don't think they ever will, because there are a lot more, shall we say, popular tripod style alien invasion movies that have been done to death now. And I think we've gone past that sort of tripod walking invasion from aliens, and it's a bit passé now, perhaps. They're looking for new stuff. So we may have missed the point at which it would have worked. I hope I'm wrong, but we may well have missed it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but out of the core members of the Tripod's cast, I think it's only Robin who is still in the acting business. Did you continue on for long after the Tripods with acting? What was your story after that?
Yes, you're right. Robin is the only remaining actor and still working. Although I think some of the other actors did carry on, but Robin is the only one that I speak with that I know is continuing to act. Certainly Kerry and John haven't, and I haven't. After the Tripods finished, I, along with a close friend of mine, started up a video production company called Inkling Productions, with the hope that we would get some sort of corporate style video production jobs, or we would do some commercials or that sort of thing, in the hope that we could earn some money to create our own productions. But we're talking about sort of 1986 going on 88, and Britain was in quite a heavy recession, and new commissions were very thin on the ground, and new commissions were only going to established production companies, and we didn't really get a look in. We did quite well in the service industry. At the time, they had a thing called VT playback. It's a video camera that fits to the eyepiece of the film camera on a film set, so that more than one person can view what the film camera sees. Traditionally, it would only be the cameraman that would be able to see. It's a very cheap, inexpensive closed circuit television, basically. And we provided those services to some film sets. So I got to work on some great music videos, Paul McCartney, for example, and a few others. We worked on quite a lot of commercials, and that took us through to the late 80s, early 90s, really, at which point my family came along, and it wasn't making lots of money. Towards the end of the 80s, it was barely making an income, actually. So I decided that I had to go off and drive a bus to support my family. I wanted to live with my then girlfriend and mother of my children. So I decided to get one of those regular jobs. And I drove an old London bus through London with a conductor on the back, the Route 13, which was actually really great fun. It was a really great job, until, again, politics got involved and they privatized the bus system, and the job changed forever. So I moved on to trucks at that point. And I then stayed with trucks until about 2014. I drove trucks up until then. And I'm not sure if any of your listeners or yourself are aware, since then, I've been making soap. I make a small range of very natural, very pure, simple soaps, which I sell online and at markets and fairs and stuff like that. So I live a very different life, you know. The trucks weren't for me. I couldn't stand sitting behind a steering wheel for many more years, because it's really a mind-numbingly boring job. And I was really glad I got out of that. I had enough of sleeping in a tin can every night. And so I jumped off with both feet and tried to give a completely new direction a go. And I'm really glad I did, because I love making soap. I love the whole thing about it. I love having my own business and taking my own way in the world. And they say you change your main career 3 times. And this is my 3rd major change now, from actor to driver to soap maker. I'm not sure what's next, but I might stop at soap maker now.
Yeah, I found it fascinating that you changed from such a drastic career change. Why soap?
Working for a supermarket really did show me how wasteful society all of us, myself, was becoming, and how dependent we are on quick, cheap, simple fixes. And I just generally in life started to look for a better way to live. I wanted to cook from scratch more, for example. I wanted to know what was in my bread, so therefore I started making my own bread. I just generally in life wanted to be less wasteful and use a better, to consume better quality things for myself. So, it's the old adage, you are what you eat, etc. And I've always preferred using soap over these chemical alternatives that you buy in a plastic bottle, which is a completely wasteful thing to be doing. And so I looked into it and I just researched it on YouTube, bought a few books about it, and realized just how simple it was to make soap. And I tried a few experiments and realized that the stuff that I was producing was way much better, felt so much nicer to use, was so much more pleasant, left the skin feeling a lot nicer. So I started making it for friends and family, and people said, you know what, this is great, why don't you sell it? And so I jumped through all the legal loopholes that you have to jump through, the same sort of legal loopholes that L'Oreal and all these other big companies have to jump through in order to sell soap and other cosmetics. And I sort of made 6 bars. I got 6 bars going and just sort of started selling them and see how they went. And I've never had a bad review since making them. No one's ever said, I don't like this soap. They've always been very positive. And the people I've met in that journey are just really great people. They're all positive people living a similar sort of lifestyle. There's a sort of little artist sort of community, both online and also at the fairs and the people that you meet. It's less, how can I put it? It's less sort of consumerism. It's less money oriented. It's about people. It's about society and living a better life and all of that kind of hippie stuff,
Yeah, I think you'd love it where I live in Tasmania. It's very much like that, with lots of cottage industries and artisans, like you say, and lots of different markets all over the island. If you ever get a chance, drop down to Tasmania. I think you'll love it.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good, yeah. I think communities like that do benefit from local people making local stuff. If you look back to previous life when we didn't have money, we used to barter. If you wanted an egg, you'd go and take what you made and go down to the guy with chickens and get some eggs from him. And not only did you get some eggs, you built a relationship with that person, and that you then learn perhaps a skill from him, or and you learn how to keep chickens yourself, etc., etc. And that community built by the interaction from not only from the businesses that they ran, but from the social life that they had. And the whole community was bettered for it. And I think I think this COVID-19 stuff as well, it really shows us that we are better off with smaller communities, looking after each other, being more proactive, making stuff locally and making it in a more economical and ecological sense. And there's my environmental rant over.
No, I was going to say, in the current world environment, soap has rarely been more important than it is right now. So if we want to support you, where can we find you?
Well, I have a website which is heritagesoap.co.uk. It's a very simple, basic website which I built myself, but there is a link on there to my Etsy webpage where they provide me with the shop services, where I sell online. And so that's etsy.co.uk, Heritage Soap UK, that sort of thing. But a Google search will find my company, which is Heritage Soap. And I'm on Twitter and Facebook. Yeah, so if people wanted to find me, that's great. I'm not sure the postage to Tasmania is going to be all that economical to get soap all that distance. But by all means, have a look, see what you think, and drop me an email with your thoughts. And it'd be nice to hear from people.
Yeah, well, the beauty of podcasts is that we're not just limited to Tasmania, so there'll be lots of UK listeners as well. So, yeah, happy to support you in that endeavour. So, really appreciate you coming on to talk about the tripods and your other endeavours. Jim Baker, thanks so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. I always like this little trip down memory lane, so thanks for your time today.
So there you go, fellas. I was able to chat with someone, and not only that, I chatted with Elizabeth Morton last year, and I couldn't talk with her and not mention the tripods, of course,
Of course.
because that's where I first saw her. Now,
Yeah, well,
is there anything else you wanted to add about the events coming up, or anything that I might have missed that you wanted to mention today?
Well, we've mentioned that we're working with Centrepoint, which I think is an important. It's a really nice angle that we're actually doing this for more than just tripods fun. We are raising some funds for a good cause. Dwayne, I had something I wanted to show you, which is which I think you'll like. So there's a few things after the event which are going to be auctioned for Centrepoint, for the benefit of Centrepoint, and there's some signed photos, and I thought you might quite like to bid on this one yourself.
Let's have a look. Oh, look at that! Yeah,
Signed by Lisa,
like it.
Kerry, and Liz.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's nice.
so that's among the goodies that will be auctioned for Centrepoint after in the months after the event, and we'll have some very special things to auction.
So we'll be able to bid on those online, will we?
Yeah, that's right. Currently working out the mechanism
Okay.
for that, but yeah, as well as raising money at the event, the actual bulk of the fundraising is probably going to happen after the fact with the auctions. But a lot of the guys have signed a lot of things for me already, specifically for this purpose, and we'll be getting more signed at the in September. Yeah.
And I believe you are recording the event. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. There's going to be some video coverage, and that's likely to be available on YouTube. At this point, there aren't any plans to sell it. It's more a record of the event for just so that those who weren't able to come get to hear the panels and get to experience a little bit of the buzz of the day.
Nice.
I think we're going to have 3 cameras on it, so it should be a nice little production in the end. Yeah.
Very good. Will, you're finally getting an event. How's it
I
feel?
know. A long time coming, Dwayne, but I'm very happy. Yeah, at long last. And to meet John, I met Kerry, Jim, and Robin at previous when we used to visit locations. But of course, John Shackley, who played Will Parker, I've never met him because he's been living and working abroad for many years. So this is a big deal to meet John Shackley.
He's almost closer to Chris than to you.
Yeah,
Just
and
over
Ken Freeman, the composer. To meet Ken Freeman, this might sound ridiculous to some, but this for me is like a Beatles fan meeting John Lennon. It's a big deal, and it's important to me to exchange a few words with him in person. After all these years, I've played that single record and that CD to death.
Yeah.
I revisit the CD many times, and the Pool of Fire suite as well. Had it on in the car last summer, and my wife Carol appreciated it just as music. She wasn't really bothered that it was the Pool of Fire imagined through music. She just enjoyed the melodies and the style of the presentation of it, and it suited our summer drive wherever we were going. I can't remember, but it suited that backdrop and what we were doing at the time, and she expressed her appreciation of it. So just to meet the guy at long last, it's important to me.
Very good.
I'm absolutely there with you, Will. I mean, it's just his music is revered in so many different corners of fandom. I mean, I know that we met Sam Yeld, John Christopher, the author, round about the same time. And I don't know whether he mentioned this to you, but the one thing in particular he mentioned to me that he loved above anything else about the show, because there were things he didn't love, but he loved the theme. You know, he just
Yeah.
thought that you know, and I've got paperwork from him, letters that he wrote to Richard Bates back in the day saying, that was one of your best decisions, hiring that guy.
Yeah.
And it's, I've just been last few days. You guys all know Andrew Pixley from Doctor Who quarters, quarters and so on. And so Andrew and I we've both been rewatching the series over the last few days and so on, in preparation for September. And Andrew, as much as anyone, it's like, says, and Ken Freeman's music is just so much better than anything else we were getting at the time, and it has so much emotion, even though it was, all electronic except for one track that had Joe Partridge's lovely acoustic guitar. But it's probably the element of the series which is actually most loved universally, I think, or most passionately loved.
I would agree.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. All right, Will, it's been great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me once again.
Don't be a stranger. Get another CD out.
I'll do my best, Dwayne. I'll keep nagging until they say yes.
And Chris, I wish you all the best. Have a safe trip over to the UK, and all the best for the book launch. And give my regards to Elizabeth, of course. And thank you very much for coming on to have a chat about one of my other favourite topics, the tripods.
That's my pleasure, Dwayne. Yeah, it's been fun. And as I say, nice to see you as well. Well,
yeah.
And I'll see you next week. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Yeah, brilliant.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, celebrating 40 years of the tripods, with my guests Will Hadcroft and Chris Jones, along with me, Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer and Ken Freeman. Check out our live event details and all other info on the podcast at sirensofaudio.com. Got some feedback? Send your emails to sirensofaudio@gmail.com or DM us at any of our socials. Our handle is @AudioSirens. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.